Hello, welcome back to Lessons Learned. Today we are going to do a little impromptu project here. I'm going to make a little wall hanging of a spool of thread using Selvages. And as you can see, my box that I have designated for Selvages is to maximum capacity. So I went out on Pinterest the other day and I happened upon an inspiring piece. It wasn't this exact one. I have not been able to find the exact one that I first saw, but this is pretty close. And I'm going to use this picture here as kind of as a guide. There's not really a pattern out here for this that I can find. But I kind of liked the selvage look for the thread area, and then also I liked the spool and how it was angled down and then straight on the edge here. That looks like a real wooden spool, if you will. And there's a lot of inspiration we can get off of Pinterest. The pins there, I don't know why I didn't pin that first thing that I saw that I really liked, but cannot find it now. It's possible it wasn't on Pinterest, but I believe it was. Either way, this will kind of guide me a little bit on what I need to do just by looking at it. And just wanted to take you along, and then you'll see how mine turns out, and you might want to make one too. And the fact that my selvages are full. My selvage box is full. So the first thing that I'm going to do, I've already cut out a piece of interfacing, and this is P44F Pellon. One side is fusible, and so I am going to choose my selvages out of my box here, and I have the fusible side up, and I'm going to baste them down on this. You don't have to use interfacing. I'm just using this because it's the lightest fabric I have at the moment in my sewing room. You could use some cotton. You could use batiste or voile, or if you've got some very limber quilting cotton, that should work fine too. But yeah, I'm going to use this, and you can just watch me pick out my selvages, and then I'll be sewing them on. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm trying to get these circles, mostly, if they have it. I'm going to try to get those on the spool the most. Some of them don't have it, but they have some other interesting things, like the name of the fabric, and sometimes there's a little saying on there. Here's one, she always looks on the bright side. That's from Little Miss Sunshine. I made a quilt out of that. And yeah, I think that's a good combination of selvages. So now what I'm going to do is start sewing them together. I might just quickly make a trim about where I want them, a little bit bigger than my interfacing, so that I can not have to deal with all of this length here. Like this one, summer school one right here is like super long. I guess I cut it off of a long piece of yardage. So let me go ahead and do that, and I will start sewing. Okay, so I have my selvages stacked up in a stack, and that is the way I wanted them to appear on my spool, this way. So now I'm going to run those through. So I'm just going to go through and leave a little edge hanging off the top here so that I can trim it. And then that'll give me kind of a guide to go by to continue with this. So I'm just going to use about a 2.5 or 3 stitch length and just sew these down. I'm just going to use my 1/4 inch to start with here. Oh, so there's my first one down. And then I might end up putting another one over top of that, something thinner, just to let that little bit of fabric show through, but yet not have this much. And then that will also cover my stitch line there. So my next one is here. Some of these are a little bit wrinkled. So you can certainly take them to the iron and iron them if you want first. I'm going to wait until I'm done and do all my ironing at one time. So I'm just going to slide that under there, and then I'm going to sew along the bottom of the selvage, that first selvage, just about a 1/8 of an inch or even a 1/16 of an inch right along the edge of that. So now I can just turn it around and take the next one and kind of slide it under here. I'm just kind of making this up as I go. I don't have a pattern. I've not read a pattern on how to do this, but I just think it would be fun and not a whole lot of thinking that you have to do for this. It's just kind of an art piece. So I'm just catching that last little edge of the selvage there where the fringes are. I don't want to hide all of the fringes. I kind of like the shabby chic look of those fringes on there, so I'm not trying to hide all of those. It's perfectly fine to let those hang out. They're not going to ravel because it's a selvage. I'm just going to slip that under there. There we go. I just pull my thread out a little bit and make a turn. Just make sure you have enough under there to catch that seam line you're making. It's kind of a top stitch with that 3 length stitch. Very nice and breezy at my house today. I'm going to try to get that phrase in there. She always looks on the bright side. I like that. That's from the Little Miss Sunshine Moda line from several years ago. I just have white thread in here. Most of these selvages are white, so I thought that would show up the least. Get some of this Cafe facet in here. Mad Plaid is what that's called. I think I'll let it slip out just a little bit so we can see all those pretty colors. Okay. Didn't quite get the whole thing. Something let your light shine on the end of that. I'm not going to be able to get that saying in there, I don't think. Maybe a light shine will be in there. Okay, so here we go. Here's my spool all sewn down. And all I have to do now is just go and cut it to the width and length of this interfacing that I'm using. And then we need to figure out what our top, sides, and bottoms should be. Be right back. Okay, so I have trimmed my 8.5 by 11.5 piece down. I did iron it. I went ahead and ironed it, got it nice and flat. This interfacing I use is not too heavy. You can see it's just a little stiffer than regular quilting cotton, not much. And I'm trying to pick out some material for the spool, and then the sides of the spool, a border, and a binding, because this will be a quilted wall hanging. So I have this strip of material here. This is the inner workings of something. It was from a sewing line. Remember when I made that machine cover for my Janome? This was part of that line, I think. Not sure, but anything, it looks like the mechanical insides of a sewing machine. So I think that will kind of set off the sides there. And then that'll be over here and over here. And then I'll also have the spool, and I have 3 pieces of grunge here that I'm trying to decide on, or regular muslin. This makes a nice spool. I wish this was just a little bit darker, or one of these was a little bit darker. This one's, of course, the darkest one, and it has a lot of gray and white in it that kind of resembles wood. This one also has quite a bit more white. This one is a little more pleasing to me at pulling in this, the white that's in this, but it's light. And then this was just cream and gray. I don't know. And then this one is just the muslin. So all you're getting with this is just a real clean wood look with a little bit of speck in it is all. But thinking about that, this is a pretty busy thing with the selvages, and then deciding to use this on the sides. I'm thinking about doing the muslin. So let's do that, and then I'll get together some measurements for that. And I'm still deciding on this, but I think that's probably going to be good for the outsides of the project, and maybe the backing too. So let me do some measuring. Okay, so the calculations are in. We have 2 pieces that we need to attach first to each side of this. So these are 11.5 long, just like this was, by 1 3/4. And these are just my best guesses to make a spool come out looking somewhat to scale. So you may choose to make your spool, wider up here or skinnier. But if so, these calculations aren't going to work for you. So basically what I've done here, I've just pinned this, but we're going to do some stitch and flip right here. It's not a full square like you would a flying geese or half square triangle. It's only part of it. So these little squares also are 1 3/4. So that kind of helps you to see too. If you want to make yours wider or skinnier, your little squares that you're going to stitch and flip here need to be that same square size, that same width. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and sew these across. All I have to do is draw a line here, or use seam tape or whatever it is you like to do to get a straight line, and sew that down, trim this off, and then press this over, and then these will be attached to the top and the bottom once you have that part finished. But first what we're going to do is put on these sides. So right sides together, and we'll stitch a 1/4 inch down each side. Okay, here we are. Don't forget to change your stitch length back to regular stitching 2.0 or 1.8, whatever you like. Sew your side pieces on here. And then I have already done my stitch and flip here. You can see how I sewed those on from corner to corner. And then I'm just going to trim off, just like you do a flying geese or any sort of stitch and flip. You cut off that little extra piece, flip that over and press it, and then we will have a perfectly proportioned spool, just like that. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this up and sew these on for you. Okay, there it is, and all pressed. This is the main attraction of your little wall quilt here. We're going to be adding some more around it. I think I'm going to go ahead and use, I have enough of this black to go ahead and do another 2-inch border around it. And there's no rule on that. You can make that as wide as you want or as narrow as you want. You could even make it really narrow and just kind of barely frame this out all the way around and then go with your additional borders. But I think I'm going to go ahead and do another 2 inches all the way around. I changed my mind, 1 3/4, make it just a little bit more narrow. So I'm going to cut these strips to length to be able to sew them onto this, and I'll be right back. Alright, so my 1 3/4 inch black border is all the way around. Actually, that's not a border, it would be background. Borders are next. So I hope that there's enough here for binding, should be, because I think I want to use this as my border. And this will match really nicely with my She Who Sews quilt that I have hanging up here in my sewing room. So let's see, how much should I cut for this? You could certainly stop right here and leave it just like this and bind this and make a wall hanging out of it. But I think I want just a little more. I want a little more. Let's see, what could we do? I'm thinking about a 3-inch. Let me see. That would be about there. Cool. And then here would be my binding. I might could do that binding on the bias so that I could get more dots showing. I might do that if I have enough. I think that's the ticket. I'm going to do 3-inch borders. So I have been doing these the sides first and then the tops. So I'll do the same with this. I'll do 2 sides and then remeasure, do my top and the bottom. So I cut my borders 3.5 inches because I wanted a pretty full 3-inch border finished. My binding will go over a little bit more than that, but I wanted, you know, wider than this is what I was after. So I went a little bit bigger and made it 3.5, and it sews in at 3 1/4, and then when I get the binding on, it'll be close to 3, or maybe just a little less than 3. But that'll be fine. And some things to keep in mind: if you have fabric that has words on it or numbers, and it bothers you to see things upside down, you'll want to pay attention. This one has a lot of wording on it. Even on this black, there's some wording. And of course, when you go sideways, you kind of have to decide which way do I want to see that. Do I want to see my words facing inward or out? This one is so tossed, the pattern. It's got words that go both ways. There's some this way, And if I would have turned it out, then the ones going this way would have been upside down. So you have to kind of consider all those things if they are things that bother you. I did notice that once I sewed this selvage in, this little measuring tape one here, it had numbers going both ways. But the part that I sewed in had them going up, which if I would have stopped for a second, I could have either not used that one or turned it the other way, but then this would be upside down. So I'm okay with it that that's like that, because these words are right side up. So if that's something that bothers you, you might want to really look at it before you sew it in. So now I'm going to get this prepared. I'm going to baste it. I'll put some batting and some backing on it, and I'll do a little free motion quilting on here. And then we'll be ready for our binding. Alright, all done with the quilting, so let's go trim it up. Here's a little closer look now that we have it all trimmed up. I went ahead and trimmed my sides down to an even 3, from the black to the outside, an even 3 inches. Because it was looking a little big. So here's some of what the quilting turned out to look like. It's fine. Just a loopy, meandering all over. Nothing special. Okay, so let's see what we can do about the binding. So for the binding, I have a fat quarter. And to be able to get all the way around my project, I'm going to have to run some bias strips. So what I did is I took my piece of fabric before it was smaller like this. It was, let's say it was a square, and I did it from corner to corner and then cut on the bias. So if you saw, if this was the selvage, for example, and you had it folded like this towards that selvage, or in other words on the bias, I cut strips this way, and then this is how they look. So being that I'm running short on having enough, I'm going to cut these straight and join them with straight seams so as not to take too much fabric away to get the length that I need to go all the way around. So I'm going to cut these pieces here, 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 and here to straighten them. I'm going to join them all together. They are only 2 inches wide, and then I will fold those over once and press them. Okay, I have my binding made, folded it in half, 2 inches. It's on the bias so that my dots will be more scattered. And I think, just to kind of frame this out, I do my bindings either way. I either attach them to the front or attach them to the back. It just depends on where I want the frame. Do I want it to be framed on the front with the framed look, or do I want a piping look, and vice versa? So since this is a wall hanging, I would like it to look framed. So I'm going to attach this to the back and then turn it over to the front to get my frame. So right now I'm just going to do my 1/4 inch here, and I'm going to leave plenty on the side here. It's going to be a very narrow frame either way, but I'm just going to go ahead and attach this. Well, I didn't leave myself much room to do this, did I? Got in a hurry. That's okay, we'll make it work. Let's see. Okay. So now all we have to do is flip it to the front, and this is very narrow, so we're just going to have a very thin frame to the front, just like that. And I think I will lengthen my stitch to a 3, and I think I will go over to the iron and iron this open through here nice and flat too. And maybe use some clips on my corners. All done. Here it is on the wall. Just put it over top of this shelf. It's not centered. That's okay. The dog's beanbag chair is in the way. I ended up doing a zigzag stitch on this binding just for kicks and giggles. I could have done a little better on that, but that's not the part that I wanted to stand out anyway, so there it is. So I will put in the description box the measurements that I used on my fabric pieces and then the overall size of this wall hanging. It was very fun to do and it turned out great. I like how it turned out. I hope you make one too. See you soon. Bye.